Progress.
And we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll just start off with a roll call here. McKee here, Schultz
Here.
Behrenkamp
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
And Counselor Bottom is excused, might make it later. And we'll go right into the work session. Jessica, if you wanna.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a follow-up work session similar to our work session that we had last meeting. It's related to code updates. So we started code updates looking back in January 2022, looking at strategic planning, prioritizing then in February what those code updates should be. And then in March, we started a work plan, which led us to these couple of work sessions to talk about code updates and really understand what we're looking to do so we can really focus in and move those ordinance updates forward. So today is all about residential design standards. So the first item on our agenda is our goal was to consider setback changes in residential subdivisions. So from a staff perspective, we wanted to get some feedback if we're looking at all residential zoning districts, or are we looking at commercial or industrial? Kind of what are we looking at for those zoning districts for setbacks? Well, actually, this is only residential, I apologize. And then are there particular changes we want to one district over another district? And then are we looking to change all setbacks or just single setbacks? Are we looking for front yard, rear yard, side yard, or all setbacks? And then are there any suggested size changes that council has? And is this related specifically to PUDs, or is this something that we want to see changes throughout our entire zoning code?
Okay.
So we do have some considerations. We want to make sure that as we're thinking about setbacks, there can be a legal issue with taking. At a certain point, it can be considered a taking, so we want to make sure to be mindful of that we're not taking land as part of the development, and then density requirements is another consideration. And then we can, depending on what we want to move forward with, in your feedback, we'd either be making PUD or zoning code changes.
When you say taking consideration, is it because the setback becomes too onerous that they can't build in that area?
Yes, so we end up taking their land.
We're not really taking it,
It's not really
we're making it
taking, but-
unusable for them,
Yes,
correct?
we're essentially moving back a portion. They have to move back so far that they can't use that front.
Sure.
Or whatever setback that is. So that's a consideration that we want.
That would be if we were
to
making some pretty substantial changes to.
Yeah, I think Natalie did a lot of research on this related to.
The idea is you want to have reasoning for the setback that you're taking. So if you can't justify the amount of setback that you're taking, it's probably onerous and won't stand up in court. However, I can't tell you how a court's going to rule, but it's just something to keep in mind. We want it to kind of be like there should be a nexus between the two.
Gotcha.
So is there any guidance by Minnesota League of Cities?
I don't think there's anything specific on League of Cities website. I haven't seen anything, but I do know when I was doing research for the church CUP, I fell upon a training video that said like anything more than 50 feet can somewhat be considered a taking. When I worked with the city attorney, we were comfortable with a 100-foot setback with the reasonings that we had for the churches. I don't feel comfortable with that for a house, but I don't think that's what we're suggesting. So.
Sure.
So. You already have?
Can I ask a question in general? So our current setbacks in ordinance, if a plot of land was to come in using the current setbacks, do they meet minimum density standards? Can someone actually build to those standards?
It's very difficult with our current our current single-family districts. So it's definitely something that staff is even kind of considered updating because it'd be very difficult to meet our density requirements with our current lot size requirements and setbacks.
On a straight plot of land with no impact?
It's not
on
impossible,
wetlands?
it would be very difficult.
So it seems like there are two ways to deal with that problem, right? One side would be you reduce the setback so that it's possible with the existing density target, or you could change the density target and reconfigure the mix of land uses so that you end up in a healthy place, but you can have the right feel that the current zoning code is attempting to create.
I think the density target is going to be a much larger discussion because we're talking about completely looking at our comp plan. So I think if it's something we want to look at in our zoning ordinance, it would be a matter of changing our lot size requirements, I think. If that's the goal, but yeah.
When we say changing our lot size requirements, it kind of sounds like staff's leaning more towards reducing some of our lot size requirements.
We are definitely open to it as staff, yes.
Gotcha. And I would say some of the council conversation has been towards increasing.
Yeah, it's the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So we can't get in any of our areas, R1, R2, R3, we can't get 3 units per acre based off of.
It's not impossible, it's difficult. So I think it would entirely depend on the parcel and the constraints of the parcel. But so far, we have not, I don't believe we've seen an example of that being successful.
And probably the reasons are wetlands, all of the other things that are on a piece of land, you just can't make that happen. When I look at the one item coming to us tonight, with
Yeah, I
the
mean-
wetlands and everything, they can't even get to 2.
That's a good
my numbers
example,
right.
yeah. We're just not able to hit that target with our underlying zoning districts.
So it goes back to 3 years ago, when the planning commission said they're tired of looking at everything as a PUD or a conditional use permit. That's the only way we can make a lot of these things happen? Is that what you
Well-
guys are kind of saying?
That's the benefit of the PUD. I know it gets a lot of complaints, but the benefit of the PUD is to allow for flexibility in design when
Yeah.
our underlying code doesn't work. So, I mean, that's basically the gist of it. And then it also allows for some negotiation for a public benefit. But that's ultimately why PUDs are helpful, is because it doesn't mean that we have to completely overhaul our code, given a specific development that comes in that we would like to see, but for whatever reason, would need multiple variants to make it work, and you don't really want a development that has more than a couple variances if you don't need it.
Just one more thing if I can. Kendra, a long time ago, when I was in Maple Grove, low density was 3 units or less per acre. Is that right? Trying to go off of what I remember.
Every city is different.
But I think that sounds right, and now it's turned into 3 to 5 is low density.
In Corcoran, low density is 3 to 5 units an acre.
Yeah.
But in Medina, it's 2 to 4.
Yep.
Part of it is, and they have another section that kind of counterbalances. I think the overall averages end up being the same.
Yeah.
Yes,
Very
all
similar.
cities in the metro need to average a minimum of 3 units an acre through their density in their different land uses.
And
And different cities approach it differently. What Corcoran did was to say on our low end it's 3 to 5, and then we need less of the higher density areas, but Medina and Maple Grove do it differently.
Yeah, no, I was aware of that. Do you guys have a chart or something that would show? We see a PowerPoint presentation coming up.
Yep. it's
Jessica's
not supposed
working
to
on
be.
one.
You want a chart of,
Not for tonight necessarily.
yeah, I don't know that we have one for tonight, related to, that. But we've talked about, for densities, we do have our plat, we are required to submit information to the Met Council for our plat monitoring. So we do have some charts, but we do it on a annual basis, so I don't have a overall.
And it's only based on the final plats that were approved for that year. So we might know of preliminary plats that have been approved, that we know more phases are coming, but it's not based on the preliminary, it's based on the final plat.
Yeah.
What I was wondering is if we had something for R1, these are the setbacks. R2.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's in our zone.
If you give me just a moment, I can pull that up.
That'd be great.
And is there a way for you to give us, look at a flat piece of land that's unencumbered by trees, wetlands, anything? Is there something that, from that, you can tell us what the setbacks would have to be to make 3 units per acre? Or do we meet it in that case? We do meet it in that case?
So council, we did an exhibit for a previous council, and that may be what you're thinking of, council member, is on a perfectly flat piece of property, it is theoretically possible to use the RSF 2 zoning standards and get 3 units an acre. We used that exhibit, if you all remember, when we did the urban conservation discussion, I shared that exhibit with you then. It is theoretically possible to do it, but it is very difficult in the real world. But I just want to be clear, it's theoretically possible
Yeah,
to do it.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But that's with standardized street widths, sidewalks,
Yep.
and then the other element that factors into this, the amount of money these folks are buying property for and then having to turn a profit and certain number of units per, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely a multifaceted conversation. I know there's kind of the whole conversation we had about buffer zones, the previous one that
Yes.
kind of related, but now also not the exact same thing. I'd say that the setback that has gotten the most conversation, I think, amongst the council recently has been the side setbacks for a while and amongst the planning commission. And feel free to step in if anyone has anything to add or thinks differently. But particularly those side setbacks in certain single-family zones, whether it's the 7.5, or I know we've done 5-10 for living and
Yes.
in garage side. I've seen some trends. I spoke with some people over at Dayton and in Rogers. Rogers is, I guess, has been at 10 for their side setbacks for their single-family zones. Dayton, I believe, recently changed and did something a little unique. For all of their single-family low-density zones, if a property is under a 60-foot width, they allow a 7.5 foot setback. If it's bigger than 60 foot, they allow, or they require a 10-foot setback, side setback. And they also have a limit on the percentage of a development that can be under the 60-foot wide lots, which is 30%. So that way it does kind of build in a mix and it gets you some of that higher, or that wider side setback that we've talked about before. So that's one thing I've seen.
I think that's kind of a good idea to have a percent standard on the
Yeah.
size of lots.
I like it.
Seems like everybody's come in with a lot size and then they've always asked for an amendment wanting a reduced lot.
Right. Yeah, I think it was an interesting idea when he told me about it. I think it'd be something to look into potentially.
All of these setbacks are a problem related to the size of the building pad, yes or no? There's no way we can push back and say, stop building such big homes? I'm brainstorming now, I'm just throwing something up against the wall, see if it sticks kind of deal. I mean, we're building. The city builders are building many big, gosh darn homes on these small parcels. I got no problem with a big house, but it's hard to sit there and stuff them in next to each other like everybody's been requesting.
Counselor Varenkamp, so with a developer, they're going to be sensitive to whatever the market demand is. So I can understand not wanting a huge house on a small lot, but a lot of people do like that apparently.
Everybody, it seems to be, and it has been, big house, find somebody to be the homeowners association, do the yard and the shoveling and everything else, and that's just seems to be the way this is
Can't
going.
some of that be steered by by government though? Because
yes.
I talked to the original owner of my house that built my house in '77. And we questioned them about, why did you build this room this size? If you would have built it just 2 feet bigger, the whole house would have been so much more spacious than these rooms here. And they told us that in '77, because of the energy crisis, they weren't allowed to build bigger homes. They were set to a certain size standard.
Government definitely has influence over it, definitely. I would say one thing we don't have in our residential districts, we don't have an impervious surface limit compared to the size of the lot. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but that would be another way to control besides the setback. But there's, I think it depends on what exactly we're trying to do. We also have but we do have a height limitation to 35 feet in our residential districts.
That's pretty standard though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 2 or 3 stories. Yeah, that's pretty typical, and still allows for a decently sized home. So I do think it doesn't necessarily just have to be handled through a setback, though. We could look at an impervious surface limit if we wanted to, but might be a bigger discussion.
Gotcha. Let's see, I know kind of another setback thing that's been tossed out a few times by the council, and I know the planning commission, I know Dean Jacobs has brought this up a few times about, do we like the, I'm blanking on the word, but the reduction that we allow for additional landscaping in certain circumstances, so there's off certain roads 100 feet, and if they did the additional landscaping, I think it's a 60% reduction?
It depends on what we're talking about.
Up to 60 feet.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so that's for the structures, I think, and then there's also
Right.
one for the parking lots.
gotcha.
Yep.
And I know I've heard some different takes on that, on if it makes more sense to not allow that reduction, so that you're keeping those bigger setbacks. I think that's where Dean stands on it, if I understand correctly. And I know previous planning commissioners, I think Meredith had some conversation on that a while ago too. I don't know where the rest of the council is on that. I can see it both ways, where it's kind of nice to have the extra landscaping, but it would also be nice to keep those really big setbacks in certain areas.
Is it feasible to keep it at 100 feet and just have a higher overall landscaping requirement in general?
So we're talking about properties specifically along a county road. So I do think when we're talking about these bigger parcels along county roads, I think it's less of an issue to require that 100-foot setback. Where it comes an issue is the smaller parcels, where it's already pretty limited, and that flexibility clause allows them to kind of have a way to get a lower setback while giving something that we want in return without needing a variance or a PUD. So I don't know if, I do see the benefit in having that clause. I don't know if we really would want to move away from that completely, because a 100-foot setback would not necessarily make sense on some of the smaller lots on county roads.
Is there a way to put that into code where it has a lot size limitation to that allowance?
Yeah, like just throwing a number, 10 acre or under would be eligible for the reduction, but above that wouldn't, or something like that.
We could look into
look
that.
into that,
Yeah.
Well, does that come on to playing commercial? Because we did have a reduced setback in Ravinia when they added that one addition on the northeast side, right? That was only like 7 acres, where they put, 20 homes or something like that in there? And they increased landscaping on 101 to reduce setback.
I missed the question. Was it, we use it for residential? and-
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of more of a commercial setting would probably be more appropriate in that regard versus a residential.
I do know of an application coming in for a residential, and they're doing an IUP for an event center. And I know that for them, they would like to use this clause. So I think there is some residential use for it as well along a county road. And I think it might make sense on their property. But their property, to be fair, is under 10 acres. So,
And that was just a hypothetical number, right?
yeah, no, so again, I think it's when we're talking about the smaller parcels, I think it's more of an issue. When we're talking about like a 40-acre parcel, I think it's easier to require a more stringent setback.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe that's one thing to look into is
Mhm.
what that number would be, that sweet spot. And then if we want to do it for just commercial or commercial residential.
The other thing might be like oddly shaped lots, we might want to allow for more flexibility too.
Yeah, maybe just staff looking into what some of those unique circumstances are that we would need to allow it for.
Yeah.
Yep, we can look at that.
Perfect. In terms of some of the other, rear or front setbacks, is there anything that stands out that we drastically need to change? I don't think that's been as much of the conversation.
I've gotten a lot of people concerned about front yards.
Okay.
'Cause a bunch of them can't park a
Gotcha.
camper in the
Yeah.
driveway, let alone
Yep.
cars and stuff, and it's like, that's what you bought. I mean,
Right.
Is a front yard setback something we want to be concerned about, or?
We amended the parking of trailers in the front yard recently, didn't we? It was,
I think
Goes
there's
up
still a
so many
setback
feet.
they have to abide by, but
Like the
so
back.
some of the smaller lots, it wouldn't work with, but definitely like in the rural residential, it should
yeah,
count.
I mean, I
a
see
lot.
I see more of a concern long-term in the developments that we've built, right? When you've got
20-foot driveway.
20-foot driveway and the cars-
35-foot trailer in it.
hanging over the sidewalk
Yeah.
and,
I think Dayton actually did do a recent 5-foot addition to the front setback as well. I don't know if that was from 25 to 30 or to 25, it was one of the two. What's ours? Typically 20?
Well, what are we, well,
It depends,
For the-
this would be the RS
Okay.
of 2.
Yeah.
Would be 20 from the front.
our rural residential's already at 50, so I don't think it's, but if we're talking about our MUSA ones, those are much smaller.
I just,
To be clear, we still have a 22-foot long minimum driveway, so that's the house, could be in front of the garage door,
By 2 feet.
remember?
Gotcha.
So
the people that have said it, it's like you bought it and now you want to put a trailer there, you're gonna have to find someplace to store your trailer. I mean, you can't move with a house back. It's just poor planning on their part is not an issue on ours, but
There are lots of storage facilities going up.
there sure are.
yeah, but you'll get into a situation you'll get into situations, like I knew people that lived in Maple Grove and they have ordinances that you can't have a
You can't
camper,
park
like,
it in the can't park in the driveway.
yeah, you can't park it in your driveway, so you have to have it on the street, and you can only have it there for so many hours before you're gonna use it, and so many hours after you use it.
Actually, you can park it on your driveway in Maple Grove, and I know this because our neighbor actually called on us when we lived in Maple Grove. It just has to be on a gravel or like, it has to be on a curb.
Approved.
surface.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But-
Originally, it changed, like originally when Maple Grove began developing, it was like a minimum of 4 hours in the street, you could park it outside, but that changed over time.
Yeah, but thinking of more standard size like RV campers or boat trailers, you're not gonna be able to get them in,
A 20-foot driveway.
Right.
22-foot driveway.
you know. I've even seen like in your guys' neighborhood where you've got a boat backed up and a car turned sideways, hooked onto it, just trying to get it in there, it's goofy and it still blocks the sidewalk, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Not every hobby will work with every size driveway.
I found out a long time ago, it's way better to have a friend with a boat than to have a boat.
Yes. Good idea.
Good advice.
Let me buy the gas. Do you have more thoughts on this?
The only
Corinne?
other thing, but I don't think it is the transition from the high-density residential, or, I mean, I guess we're calling it low-density, but it feels like, to those of us who live in rural areas, it feels like high-density. The transition then to what the people with larger plots, and I don't know if that's considered a buffer, like, I think that something already exists. But, you know, there are people who lived or moved to larger parcels for space, and then when a development comes in and butts right up to your property, a lot of folk are just throwing their hands up in the air and moving. And it would just be, like, I don't know if there's any way to find a medium or to offer something in between that says, you know, obviously we can't change that more dense neighborhood is coming in, and that is there, but is there a way to ease the transition.
Mhm.
That is
Yeah.
something that has come up at planning commission meetings, that's why I bring it up, it's not necessarily personal, but.
At the last work session, we talked
We
about
talked about
that.
buffer zones
And where we had kind of left it was the idea of 30-ish feet of fully landscaped buffer between different zones. So if you've got rural residential, an existing neighborhood, and then, say, a RMF3 comes in next door, you would get the 30 feet that has trees and shrubbery and all of that stuff, separating the existing neighborhood from the new one, before you would have those homes. It's not perfect, but
No, I mean,
it's more than you see in most cities.
sure.
Yeah, but I think, or go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just reiterating, I think the buffer zone is where
That's.
that works, yeah. But I do like that idea, because I think it has come up a lot, for sure.
And then I was just gonna comment on the setback thing. I'm in full support of the maintaining 100-foot setback, because I think not only does it allow for, I drive on County Road 10, we live on County Road 10, and I think eventually County Road 10 and County Road 30 are both gonna be 4-lane roads, right? They're major thoroughways. And I look at how close those townhomes are already to 10, and I think now you expand that road. And so I feel like the allowing so many setback variances, with additional landscaping, it narrows the ability, how close those residential homes are gonna be then to a major thoroughway. And so I think we can give a better nod to the future by allowing the residents who live in those homes a greater buffer. I think
Gotcha.
more people wanna live farther from a county road than closer.
One thing I'll add to that, though, is when a plat comes in, we do take right-of-way for future road increases on county roads. So it's the setback from the property lines that are established. So we do try to account for that road expansion later on. That's when we have a plat, we send it to the county, and they'll let us know we need the X amount of right-of-way. And that's our chance to take that, to try to account for that.
Is that setback then 60 feet from center there?
It's not from the road, it's based on the lot line, so it's 60 feet from the front lot line. So that's after right-of-way's been taken for the road.
So what I'm saying is how close is the road gonna get to those townhomes?
Right.
So I guess I'd have to look, but
No closer than 60 feet.
No closer than
Yeah.
60 feet, because you can't start the 60 feet until you're at the edge of the right-of-way.
Right.
So it's not in the middle, it's not measured from the middle of the road, it's
Right.
measured from the edge of the right-of-way
Okay.
over.
Yeah, thank you.
Unless the county decides in 50 years that they need to take additional right-of-way, and you might have problems.
That might be a little
Townhouses.
harder to plan for, but to take right-of-way when there's no plat, I don't even know if you can really do that without paying significant money,
You
so.
would have to, you'd have to.
County could still ask, but
Yeah.
not
They
gonna
did
get
it
it.
in Maple Grove on County Road 10 when they expanded it to 4 lanes. They
Yeah.
did it to all the folk whose homes were on
Okay.
both sides.
I just know that it's at that point, it's significant cost that the government would be looking at to make that change, because the only time we can get it for free as a government is through a platting process.
So they would either go by easements or have to go through the eminent domain process.
Fun stuff.
I know Chair Jacobs wanted to contribute to this. Are we online? Is he
Yeah, see, I know.
on the phone?
He said he was gonna be here.
Yep, he was.
Me that too.
You have one call-in user, or the title is call-in user. If you want to go ahead and press, if you're Dean Jacobs, you can press *6 and unmute yourself.
And if you're not Dean Jacobs, he's still good.
At this time, they
That's
haven't
not-
unmuted, so I'm
okay.
guessing that's not Dean.
I know he had an earful for me yesterday when he was talking about this. And he was gonna come, so.
I think he'll be here for the meeting tonight. I know he had some stuff on the,
Yeah, he's
Northeast
got-
District. Yeah. Well, okay, that kind of covers at least some of the
I
initial
think that gives us
questions.
some good feedback on that.
Regarding if it's related to PUDs or not PUDs, it kind of could be both, or
I
either,
think
or
it
neither.
certainly could be both, based
Yeah.
on, depending on what we're looking at. We just wanted to make sure that if we're only looking at PUDs, that's keeping it in mind for when we're doing PUD flexibility. And if it's for that a zoning district and if we're looking to do straight plating, just understanding if it's for that.
Sounds good. And then was there anything on the non-MUSA areas we wanted to get into?
I
Nothing
haven't
stood out
heard
to
too
me.
much on
No.
MUSA. What's
No.
going on?
Yeah, when I don't recall the exact discussion, we just talked about whether or not we should look at density in non-MUSA areas. So
Gotcha.
just wanted to understand if that's something we still want to do.
I think that was John's issue in the goal-setting session. He was the one who advanced that
Okay.
idea. And
Maybe
without
we do
you
want to
guys-
talk to John
I
and see if he
can
has
follow
any
up with
thoughts that he
John
wants to
and-
bring up in a work session.
And
Perfect.
if not, if we don't have any other ideas on that, I can just work with John and kind of let you all know what's happening, what his thoughts were. And
Sounds like a plan.
So to that point, I'm trying to remember everything that Chair Jacobs talked to me yesterday. Bechtold Farms, that was 120 acres, if I remember right. And they had 12 building rights.
I can't remember the exact acreage on the parcel, but yes, they had 12 building rates, so the initial parcel at one point had enough acreage to account for that, because they didn't do any kind of density bonus. So
Okay.
so the ultimate density in that overall area is 1 in 10 right there.
Okay, but the lot sizes on that parcel range from,
I think like 3 to 20 acre, like their biggest parcel is about 20 acres. A lot of it's unbuildable though, because of the wetland and a huge easement, a conservation easement. And then I think there's,
Commissioner, or Chair Jacobs made the comments of, 20 acres can be broken down to 4 or 5 acre lots kind of deal. He said it way more eloquently than me. As far as the density in the rural side was his suggestion, but we'll wait for him, or if somebody wants to talk with him, or if he shows up here shortly. I think he had some pretty good ideas on the rural side of density
Gotcha. Yeah,
compared
I'm happy to chat with him whenever.
compared to this. And John, goodness gracious, John would have all kinds of
Yeah.
ideas too.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm sure I'll grab his ear at some point and we can see if we want to set up we can have another work session on some of that stuff if there's enough there.
Or we could bring it forward as an item on the
Yeah.
agenda and talk about whether or not we want to move it forward.
Perfect. Sounds good. Anything else?
So while most of us are here, we started off with the discussion of Medina's overall low-density residential being 2 to 4 versus R 3 to 5. I've heard scattered statements that people roughly agree with that range. Do we want to give staff any direction about considering comprehensive plan changes to enable us to do that? Thumbnail math from the comp plan, it looks to me as though shifting between 80 and 250 acres into high-density residential or mixed use could get you enough additional units to be able to change the existing 2,656 net acres that are low-density residential guided to a 2 to 4 range. Seems like we could find that in light of, when you look at the future land use map, how many of the areas that we have zoned as downtown mixed use or mixed use, where they immediately cut off and become low-density residential. Putting in appropriate transitions, maybe expanding some of those so that you can have the low-density areas be more what we, as a city, have our vision for low-density residential. So we're not having to shoehorn in multiple different kinds of building types might be appropriate. I would support it, but I want to see how the rest of you feel.
How many people would come in with a plan of 2 units per acre?
I don't think we know until we try. But they're being requested to come in at a minimum of 3. They end up coming in at between 2.7 and 2.85, looking at recent. So they're not ridiculously far from that, but they're including things like other building types in order to get to those levels because of the
Right.
way the parcels are.
Because of the way the parcels are.
It's a big conversation.
Yeah, it's
I've-
ongoing for many, many, many.
Right.
Would that be a comp change?
It would be.
We would have to
comprehensive.
re-guide several parcels, yes.
Yes, and likely we'd want to, I'm not sure if we'd want to go through the whole process to get input when we've changed parcel types or zoning. We've generally tried to inform folks when we're doing that, so there'd be some notices and some reprinting, there'd be reprinting and other public hearing costs, so we'd have to.
When's our next comp plan update anyways?
2028.
2028.
6 years.
It has to be done in 2028, and we start the process earlier, or that's when we
Theory.
start?
In theory.
But when will we start it? Because it's a years-long process. I'm just trying to remember what the.
We
They're
started in
technically due in
2017.
2028.
Okay.
Most people, I think the only city I know that was done on time this time was Medina.
Right.
We started in 2017.
Yep, before 2018.
And
Okay.
finished in late 2019.
Okay. I mean, if it's something the council wants to direct staff to do, I mean, that would take significant time, significant budget, especially for proper outreach to the community, but it's definitely possible.
I'd kind of be open to seeing what it looks like on a map.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can just shade in some colors on a map and figure that math out, share it with us and not do a deep dive into it.
And maybe just as a real high level, in theory, what it could do, and Jeremy, feel free to.
There's going to be a
You
lot
don't
of ways
have
you
to
could do it.
have
There's tons of ways you could go about it. One of the simpler ways, I know one property owner contacted me about his parcel and wanted to do something that would be higher. The buildings would be taller than are allowed. If you rezoned that mixed-use area to downtown mixed-use, you could probably get a lot of additional units in there. And that might require less than doing something different, like going from low-density to mixed-use in some other place. It's going to be, there's a lot of degrees of freedom in what you would end up with.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it sounds like we're open to looking at it more and see, at least big picture, if it's something that is feasible, or if it's just too much of a change, or if it creates headaches we don't even know yet. But I'd be interested in seeing some high level, don't burn yourselves out over it, but.
Yeah, I was gonna add, one of the questions I was gonna ask is timeline. Thoughts on when you'd like to see something like.
Yeah, I would.
Back, just 'cause I know we do still have some work ahead of us.
Yeah, I would say this type of, like, the stuff we came into this work session for, that's more of a priority. I think this is, even if we wanted this to be, this would be a longer term project, even if we wanted to prioritize it right now. So I would say there's not an immediate timeline on that, unless you guys feel differently.
I just don't want to get too far away from the conversation that we
Yeah.
forget what
Right.
we're talking about,
Yep.
so.
So yeah, maybe just some check-ins and hypotheticals and just kind of see where it goes from
A
there.
couple months, maybe.
Yeah. Works for me. Perfect. Anything else?
Is there any concern about rear yard setbacks? I mean, we've come into it, it's gonna be on tonight's agenda with one item about encroaching and rear yard setbacks, and then we had the discussion with Tavera when that came in about rear yard setbacks and decks and whatnot, and we had a variance in Ravinia because of rear yard setbacks. I don't know. Decreasing them probably isn't the best idea to accommodate, because I guess I don't know what to do on that if we just leave it the same. But-
Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of decreasing it for sure. Wasn't there some conversation, or do we somewhere allow, in certain circumstances, like them to go into the setback for a porch?
For the
Yes.
wetland,
For,
yeah, the wetland setback,
Okay.
the porch can encroach a little bit. It just kind of like, if you pull up what we just had up, that table, we allow a front porch to encroach into the front setback, like if it's 120 square feet or less, it can be a 15-foot setback. So yeah, we do allow some flexibility when we're talking about, like an attachment to the structure, not a full structure.
Gotcha.
yeah, so that portion down there, minimum separation between structures.
Well, no, so it's like the front porch, 120
Oh,
square foot,
gotcha.
is 15-foot setback from the front property line. And then within our wetland overlay district, we allow decks to encroach into, by I think into like 10 feet, if I remember off the top of my head correctly. But yeah, so we allow for 6 feet, I'm sorry, okay, thank you. But it's, we do allow for some encroachments when it's, but it can't be a structure, like a four-season structure. It's more like a
Okay.
deck.
Okay.
I mean, I agree, I definitely wouldn't recommend lowering it. But maybe 30 with that caveat in some circumstances is fine.
I wonder if we'd take care of that with the impervious lot size.
Okay.
You know, as you do as a percentage of impervious lot size, they have to reduce their building pad to put a porch on.
Yeah.
If the porch had a.
Sure, so I think like if it's a deck.
If it's a deck, that
It might be a
wouldn't
little
impact it,
different,
I
yeah.
guess.
But if it's a porch.
Unless they put a patio under it, and then.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's true, yeah. That'd be a way for them to get around it, would be a deck without a patio underneath. Yeah, we could look at that. I know Brooklyn Park has an impervious surface limit for the residential districts. So I know it's not unheard of to do that.
Maybe if you could include some of that, just so we can kind of see what that's like and what the impacts would be, that'd be great.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's actually it. Anything else, or I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Got a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.